Hello everyone, this is Skylar Fox. Happy New Year. Hope you all have had a wonderful time with the holidays, and thank you very much for checking out this video. Just a couple months ago, I released a video game onto GameJolt, the first 3D video game that I've ever published just on the internet. This video game is pretty short. It's only about between 15 minutes to 30 minutes worth of gameplay, depending on how long it may take you to beat it. It is actually a fan game of an indie game series. For those of you who have followed my channel for a while, you may have remembered, gosh, almost a decade ago at this point, a video that I made that was kind of a fake trailer for a 3D remake of the indie game series called Master of the Wind. Master of the Wind is an indie RPG series made in RPG Maker. It started their releases in 2005, and I believe the last one was in 2011. They were released in kind of these little arcs that were each about 4 to 5 hours long. You can play the game totally for free. Highly, highly, highly recommend. It's not only my favorite indie game, it is one of my top video games ever. Highly, highly recommend it. And so I've been a huge fan of this series for a while, and lately I've been trying to kind of self-teach myself more game development with Unreal Engine 4. I've done some video game projects before with RPG Maker was one of the first things that I ever used. I dabbled a little bit in Unity during its early days, and then lately I've been learning a lot about Unreal Engine. Well, this project was kind of me forcing myself to complete and release a game in Unreal Engine. Now, when I say complete game, obviously I don't mean like a full 20-hour game or anything like that. But the idea behind this was that I would have a project where a player could come in, they could play this game, they could do a new game, they could save, they could do all those things, and they could complete the game up until a credit sequence. So it's kind of forcing myself to sort of learn a smaller version of what the whole picture of game development looks like from start to finish. And when you start big projects like these, especially when you're learning, you're going to be making mistakes, and you're going to be learning along the way that, oh, there were some better ways that I could have done that. But the problem is that if you keep changing and making those little adjustments, you're going to continue to see more and more flaws, and you won't actually finish something. So even though I know that there were problems with this game and there were things that I could have improved upon, the main goal was just to kind of finish something and take the lessons that I learned from this project and kind of apply them to future projects. And so this was kind of a massive learning tool for me. So my game is out. It is over on GameJolt, and I would recommend you guys play this before watching. But if you can't, totally understandable. Unfortunately, it turns out that developing with Unreal Engine comes with its own little quirks, and there's a lot of people I know who, unfortunately, their system hasn't been able to play the game for one reason or another due to various hardware issues, which is very unfortunate. I'm sorry if that was one of you. There's not a whole lot that I can do about many of those issues. But as the title suggests, this is going to be me as the game creator kind of playing through this and giving my own sort of commentary about what it was like making this. And so I hope you guys enjoy this and maybe learn something from it. And thank you very much again for watching. And here we are, Master of the Wind. Yeah, so this title sequence was pretty faithfully recreated from the original one, only this is a little more animated. The logo itself I actually had to redo completely from scratch because the original logo was, at least the one that's publicly available, is too low res, so I had to recreate from scratch, which is harder than you might imagine, especially when you're trying to recreate the gradient effects of the wind part of the logo. But yeah, let's get started. Alright, and the first cutscene of the game, and you know, as fitting enough, it was one of the first cutscenes that I had worked on. Gosh, the rain particles was one of the, this was one of the things that I had to tweak the most just because of what it would do to performance. And by the way, OBS is what I'm using to record the footage, and for some reason OBS always records it in a way that makes it look like a lower frame rate. I might not have the right settings on it. So as I'm playing this, the actual final recorded footage is probably going to look a little bit worse than what I'm actually seeing.
No way you're going to evade us. Surrender, and maybe we'll go easy on you.
There's nowhere to run now, cretin.
So the guys that reprised their roles were for Shroud and Andau, Chris and André, and it's so interesting because initially I've this is Chris's third time playing as Shroud. He's played Shroud in all the videos that I've done, and that opening line where he says "Give it up, Andau," you know, he says that line in the original trailer I made like 10 years ago, and it's so kind of funny to look back and see not only obviously my skills have improved, but even like, I mean, he is so freaking good right now. He was great before, but like, man, he absolutely kills at this game. The whole cast does. I'm really happy about it. But yeah, one of the first things I wanted to make sure that I did was have something there that prevents the player from leaving, and that was in the original game too. I actually changed Stoic's dialogue there, where he's like, "We're not leaving until we catch that monster." In the original game, it was like some weird gag or something like, "You better pack your lunch, kids. We're going to be here a while." And I think that was kind of left over from because Master of the Wind was released in arcs, and they were constantly updating it, and Stoic's personality didn't really seem to sit through until Arc 2, and so that was a line I changed just because it felt a little too comic for kind of the attitude that Stoic was having towards Andau at this time.
Hi there.
A ferry in a deserted place like this?
Yep, just arrived here the other day actually. I'm what you'd call a dungeon fairy.
We got Kelly Peterson as the fairy, who does, again, such a great job. I'm really happy with all the voice work that we've got over here.
That's what we're here for. Chat me up if you want to see the services I offer.
Now, the fairies in this game are pretty similar to how they were in the original game, where they're kind of there as sort of a support mechanic, where, you know, you could have the entire party get healed. I did add that line, though. If you're already fully healed, it's like, what's the point? There's no point in healing. But yeah, so you could shop for items and ask for boss hints and all that kind of stuff.
A vampire just arrived? Sorry, I don't know anything about that. Well, if he's running away from you, I guess he'd probably just try to evade you if you confront him.
And so in the original game there were boss hints, and for this, since there is a boss fight against Andau, that's technically kind of a hint. It's a very subtle hint, but it's just kind of the idea that, yeah, when you do eventually fight Andau, you know, he's going to be kind of on the evasive. He's going to be teleporting around a lot. But, you know, be careful regardless, because he is still a boss fight.
See you later.
But yeah, we'll go ahead and proceed through the next room. And this entire next sequence that is about to play did not happen in the original game at all. This is essentially a combat tutorial sequence, which is totally optional. You can skip it if you want. I'm going to go ahead and continue with it so I can kind of talk about this. But the original game didn't have a combat tutorial because it was kind of a typical turn-based RPG, so it was very straightforward, whereas here, it's a little different. You know, you got your attack buttons, and you also have different abilities and skills, and the way that the combat was working for this remake, it definitely felt like it warranted a kind of combat tutorial, and right outside where the fairy was seemed like the most appropriate place to put it in. And I kind of struggled narratively trying to figure out a way to, like, you know, how could I have the tutorial sort of make sense? Because realistically, you know, Shroud and Stoic, they've been doing this for a while. They should already know how to fight and how to do combat. And so the way I kind of tried to frame it as is, well, oh, this fairy is the fairy for this for Fort Drake. You know, she was assigned to this area, so she knows the monsters. So it's supposed to be framed as kind of, oh, here's how you fight these monsters, you know, even though obviously the tutorial is very general and teaching you about combat in general. That's kind of the narrative I tried to flow with it, because otherwise it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for why the fairy would be trying to help Shroud and Stoic here. I always like it when games kind of make the tutorial at least make some kind of sense narratively. They don't have to. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if games don't do it, but it was something that I felt was kind of important here, personally.
The downside to casting spells this frequently is that you quickly run out of mana. You can recover mana with an ether. Here, take this and
Now we
try
got
it out.
ourselves an ether, and we could swap between the different different item types. I am using a PlayStation controller right now for playing this. That's more or less kind of how I sort of designed this game, was to work better with a controller than with a keyboard and mouse. I mean, you could definitely easily play it with a keyboard and mouse, and a lot of people have, but personally I think it works a lot better, or feels a lot more natural with an actual controller. But yeah, we're starting to see one of the main mechanics kind of unfold with the idea that you can swap between different characters live mid-game. And it was kind of funny because I started work on this project, I want to say like the end of 2019 or so. As soon as, and I'd already had this player switching mechanic planned out and everything, and as soon as Final Fantasy VII Remake came out in like early 2020, it was like March or something, I remember thinking, I'm like, man, are people going to think that I ripped that off, that that's where I got the idea from? But, I mean, it doesn't really matter in the end. It's a very basic idea. But I remember kind of worrying about that, because even like the way that it works is kind of similar, with the camera moving to each character. But yeah, and all the enemy movesets are pretty much taken from the game, the original game, and it was always interesting because with the original game, all that you really have is just kind of the name of an attack. So like for the Rotting Corpse, it was like Noxious Breath or whatever. It's like, okay, so how do I actually implement that in the game? This one attack that the Ghost is doing is the one thing that I kind of sort of created, because the Ghost doesn't have like an attack like that normally. It was mainly inspired by the artwork done by Anchor, because in the artwork he has like the Ghost with those kind of blue fireballs swirling around them, and so that's kind of the inspiration for that little attack.
But the truth is, I've gotten very rusty.
And that line there about Stoic being very rusty is kind of a reference to the fact that he's starting this game out as level 1, which if anyone has played the original Master of the Wind series, you know that Stoic's been around for a while. He's over 900 years old, and so he's definitely pretty experienced in combat. And so for him to start this game at level 1 is kind of funny. So just sort of threw that line in there, like, yeah, I used to be better. I've gotten rusty.
No problem. I'll be in the other room if you need anything. Best of luck.
And then this sequence over here with these last set of enemies, these are just, if you skip the tutorial, it would just kind of cut to this. So regardless, you do have to fight enemies to proceed through the rest of the dungeon.
It's over. Come on.
Yeah, one of the hardest things to do with this game, and something that, I know still full well has problems. I mean, you could see a lot of them even as I'm playing this, was just the AI. I mean, it is hard stuff, especially with a game as complicated as this, with a lot of moving parts. And trying to prevent the AI from interrupting its own actions or overlapping with other actions. And there's definitely a lot of methods that I know would have been better than than how I ended up approaching it here. Like I said, that was kind of one of my big goals with this project, was that, if I come across any problems, just kind of fix them the best way that I can, learn the lesson, and then just kind of apply the lesson for whatever next project I have. Otherwise, I would keep remaking half of this game multiple different times, because there were so many times when I would be making something in the game and I could tell more or less what the problem was, but I was too far deep in that I was just like, you know what, like I would have to recreate this from scratch, just kind of learn the lesson and move on. And it's a painful thing to do sometimes, but oftentimes it's necessary if you want to get something done. Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video, a lot of this project, was for fun, obviously, and kind of to pay tribute for my love of the series, but it was also sort of as a learning experience, and it definitely accomplished that for sure. And so this is where the actual dungeon begins, and this is the puzzle that, I take no credit for this, because this was ripped straight from the original game with Artbane, who is the master of dungeon design. He's made some of most fun dungeons I've played in an RPG. I've already skipped to the solution where the key was, so hopefully there's no one watching this that hasn't played it before that knows how to cheat it now. But yeah, the basic idea is that you have these holes that are all along the Fort Drake floor, and so you actually have to fall through certain floors in order to access certain areas, because a lot of the treasure chests that will have the items or keys that you need are going to be locked behind these gates, and you can only get behind those gates by falling in through some of these floors. And so it definitely kind of plays tricks with you at the beginning, where when Stoic's like, watch your step, chum, there's a lot of holes here, you know, and makes you think, oh, we got to avoid those, but nope, you actually want to fall in those holes. My Shroud is just dying a lot. I should probably switch over to him.
Back in the game.
There should be some other potions here. Yep. Oh, and that just now where Shroud jumped in, that took a while to get that working right. To get the players actually kind of, your party members actually following you, even to the point of jumping through those holes. It was a lot harder than you might expect it to be. And it doesn't always work out perfectly, for sure. There's still some problems with it. So we're not too deep into this dungeon, so I'm going to go back to the first area and have the fairy heal us all again, not waste our items yet.
Hiya! How can I help you? Yeah, you look like you need it. Here goes.
I did like this. I did have Kelly. She probably recorded, gosh, like, probably a little bit more, at least as far as main dialogue goes, not including battle grunts or things like that. As far as like actual legit lines of dialogue, she probably said more than I think Shroud and Stoic do, which is insane. A lot of that is because it had a lot of alternate takes. Like when she's healing, there's like 4 different lines of dialogue she could cycle through with that. Because I always love that in games when just there's it helps make the characters feel a little bit more alive, the more kind of alternate takes there are. Let's go ahead and enter the pause menu and save our game really quick. And yeah, even things like a lot of the front end menu was very much based on how the menu looked in the original game. In the original game, it used like the actual in-game sprites for Shroud and Stoic. Here, I just use the actual battle illustrations from Anchor. All right, and we lost the first floor key. We can never use it again.
The keyhole's on the other side of the gate.
If the man who designs this place crosses my path one day, he will pay dearly for this.
I love that. I love Will's delivery on that too. He did really good. And so here is the rope swinging puzzle, which has definitely been probably the most controversial element of this remake for sure. I essentially made the rope swinging puzzle more or less kind of accurate to how it was in the original game, where you get on these ropes and you can kind of move in 90-degree angles. You know, either forward, left, right, or backward, or whatever. And then you sort of jump forward. The main idea is that you jump on the ropes, and then when the rope is like at the end, that's when you jump forward to actually leap. If you do it too soon, like this, you just kind of jump down to the floor. And that was the intended design. A lot of people weren't particularly big fans of that. I've seen a lot of people either mistime their jumps or just get it wrong. And that could happen, where you fall through not just one floor, but 2 floors. Have the game really troll you. And yeah, this is definitely one of those puzzles where you could tell that the original dungeon design was, of course, designed in a way that was meant for a top-down RPG, whereas here, with this being like a more 3D approach, it definitely becomes more challenging just on the fact that it's 3D. There's a lot of things to kind of consider how you want to approach things when making the transition to 3D. Particularly, one of the things that is different is that you can actually see the floor below you, whereas in the original game you couldn't. It was just kind of a dark abyss, and you weren't sure where you were falling. So that was kind of interesting, trying to figure that out and translate that in my head. It's like, okay, how would this area actually look? But yeah, another thing that I would see people do a lot of, and this is something that really I should have programmed in, but didn't, mainly because I thought, oh, it would be a fun thing for players to exploit if they really want to. But, you know, that was probably not the right mindset, especially for a project with this kind of scope. But the idea was that if you're swinging on the ropes and you jump, if you're moving the left analog stick, you could still control where your player is moving. So if you're trying to just jump to the next rope, it's better to not move forward at all. Like, don't press WASD or don't move the analog stick. Just press the jump button and let it do its thing. Because if you try moving, you could easily move to where you're not actually going to the next rope. Now, I left that in there because I initially thought, oh, that'd be like a fun thing if people wanted to like try speedrunning this thing or whatever. But I think that was definitely the wrong call in hindsight, for sure. I probably should have made it to where, like, if the player tries moving their movement stick or WASD or whatever during that sequence, that it would just lock them from doing that. Like, they couldn't actually change the trajectory of the player. So definitely some lessons learned there. Now, something that couldn't be done in the original game that you can do in this one is you can still, you know, swap between players. Which means that, because in the original game with this rope puzzle, you only had Shroud as kind of the main player that you were in outside of battles. He was like the main, the head player that you'd be controlling. But here, I could split the work between Shroud and Stoic, so that way Shroud doesn't have to move all the way around. Now, there is a puzzle in the original Master of the Wind that actually does do this. It does let you switch between 2 different parties with a rope swinging puzzle. But that doesn't happen until, I want to say Arc 6. It could be Arc 4, but I'm pretty sure it's Arc 6. I could be misremembering. It's been a while. But yeah, that was the whole dungeon, and now here we are on the rooftop here, and we're gonna get ready to fight Andau. So let me just make sure that our items are equipped well. I may want to give Shroud the elixir, and I think that works, yeah. Oh, but before we go in, let's go into this area. Now, in the original game, you needed a key to open that door. I ended up not even bothering. I just kind of left it as a little thing that players could access. And it actually has more than what the original had. It has more useful items. Here is where you actually have some new weapons. So here we can equip the stabbing daggers for Stoic and the battle spear for Shroud. And it'll not only, you know, increase their stats, but it'll also change the actual weapon mesh in game itself. And so Shroud has like a new kind of a bluish spear, And Stoic has like these shorter, kind of large knives for his weapons. And so the idea is that they're shorter range, but greater in strength. But yeah, so with our new weapons, and we're all at level 3, I think we should be good to go. We'll just go ahead and save again.
Uh-oh.
There's nowhere to run, Andau. You've reached a dead end.
Ah! Why must you always pester me?
You can't just
So cutscenes was one of the last things that I worked on in the game, and a lot of that was because I wanted to wait until I had all the voice lines first before I start animating the character, because I always feel like it's important to make sure that the animation is based off of the actual performer's performance rather than the other way around. I feel like you get just better results that way, and I'm really glad I did it that way, because all the voice actors absolutely killed it. And the neat thing is that sometimes, you know, because I didn't do a whole lot of necessarily directing with these voice actors. I sent them the script, I gave them summaries of their characters, their backstories, like how they're supposed to act and behave. And for the most part, I kind of let them kind of own the character and see where they took it. And, you know, and if there need to be redos, I'd let them know. But for the most part, there really didn't need to be many. Some actors I didn't even have to have redos at all, and they just absolutely killed it. And the cool thing is that, you know, sometimes, like, when I play the original game, like, I always hear certain lines in a certain way in my head. And sometimes these actors match it, but sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do a whole different read. And I'm like, oh, that's different, but that actually sounds better. That sounds cool or something, so let's use that. And it's that's been one of the most fun parts about this project, and so really can't give these actors enough praise. They've absolutely killed it. And this animation sequence here, where they're kind of fighting Andau, this is sort of more or less a recreation of a sequence that happened in the original game. Because in the original game, you just had sort of a cutscene where Shroud and Stoic would be fighting Andau, and then Andau would spoilers, escape. But there was no boss fight. But here, for the sake of this project, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make this whole thing an actual boss fight. But I still want to include the fight sequence too, so that's why you have that little fighting sequence before the actual boss fight takes place. Let me see you suffer. And so now we got 6 homing fireballs, so we gotta dodge all these. And so yeah, kind of the main thing behind this boss fight is that, you know, Andau's main priority is to kind of escape. You know, I mean, he'd love to kill these guys if he can, but he's kind of in self-preservation mode, and so the main idea is that he'll be teleporting a lot in this fight. And you even got this big attack here where he's just constantly teleporting while he's just charging at you, and so you can either guard against it or you can dodge it. Either one will work. And that's one vampire defeated. Gosh, this sequence took forever to do, where he's like transforming into the bat. It's based on how he transforms in the original game, which was just kind of this sort of morph with the kind of turns into a silhouette and transforms into the bat. And gosh, trying to recreate that, especially in real time, was so difficult. I had to have like 3 different models of Andau all at once, kind of in there, just to make it work right.
I did take a chunk out of him, though.
We'll get him.
That's what we said last time. Now another innocent girl will be a victim for that freak of nature.
Well, we tried our best.
Some comfort that is.
I love that sigh that Will puts in. That wasn't in like the actual dialogue. It was just some comfort that is. But that sigh, I'm just like, oh, that's such a good touch. Just little things like that. But yeah, so that was the Master of the Wind fan remake. Like I said, pretty short game overall. Took a lot of time to work on this. A lot of lessons were learned. I grew a lot from this project, and I'm glad I did it. And it's been a lot of fun working on this project. The only thing that's kind of been sad is sort of I've been working on this kind of almost in secret for a while until it was finally ready to release. And so I'm glad it's kind of out here. And it's been a lot of fun working on this, and it's definitely preparing me to kind of make further and maybe even more ambitious projects in the future. And yeah, so we got the end credits through here. I'm just glad that I finally have an end credit sequence where it's not just completely made up of, hey, everything was done by Skylar Fox, because, I did actually have some outside help with this, with the voice acting and also using illustrations and art from Anchor, and even just the fact that this was a remake. Shout out to Kyle, who helped with not only testing a little bit of the game, but also helping with porting this to Windows, because I was developing on a Mac, and Unreal Engine, for some reason, you can't actually build for Windows unless you have a Windows, and vice versa. You can't build for Mac unless you have a Mac, so had to get his help for that, but very much appreciate it. And very much appreciate you guys for watching this Let's Play. After the credits, I do have one more thing to show off here. It does kind of lead you back into the opening of the game again, the title sequence. But one thing you'll notice after the logo appears is that now we got ourselves a little extras menu at the bottom. And so this was a fun little Easter egg I decided to throw in. In fact, I'll go ahead and show it off really quick before we go. Where you have alternate looks for all the characters. And so for Shroud and Stoic, I basically put them in their civilian outfit, where they would be outside of being Shroud and Stoic. For Stoic, it was so easy. It was literally he just doesn't wear clothes. Andau, I decided, I'm going to try to make his a human version, which you only see in the original Master of the Wind game as like a secret ending that you can unlock. It's like a flashback sequence going over Andau's origin and his life before he became a vampire. And so I only had kind of the sprite sheet to work with, and so that was kind of a fun challenge trying to get this to work.
You think so? Farewell, gentlemen.
I really hate it when he does.
And the nice thing about this, and honestly one of the big reasons that I even did this in the first place, was because when I was animating Shroud for his cutscenes, I animated the whole face. Even though like he's wearing a mask and you can't actually see his eyes, I also animated his eyes, and I was kind of disappointed that like, man, I'm putting in all this effort, but like he's just gonna be wearing this mask this whole time. So that was one of the reasons that I did want to include his civilian outfit, was just kind of to give an excuse to be like, see, now people can actually see what that he's actually fully animated in his face and everything. And then the fairy here is green with blonde hair, and a lot of people think this is like a Tinkerbell reference, which I can't say I blame them, because that is what it looks like, but this is sort of a reference to the actual sprite of the original Master of the Wind, because in the original there was kind of this interesting inconsistency where the sprite of the fairy would have blonde hair, but then the actual face graphic for dialogue, she would have green hair. And so I ended up going with the green hair for like her default appearance, but this was kind of an alternate recolor to sort of pay reference to the fact that, yeah, both of those designs were kind of used at once, and now here they are separated. But yeah, that is about it. And, link will be in the description down below to play this over on GameJolt if you haven't already. I will also include a link for the original Master of the Wind, which you can play, and highly, highly recommend that if you haven't already. It is one of my favorite RPGs out there. And just want to thank you all again for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.